Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Just looking to get some folks logged in real quick. We're going to be looking out for our WICT representative who's going to tell us a little bit more about women in cable telecommunication. One sec. Let's see.
Oh yeah, we only have 37 Charlene's on. Awesome.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Hey, Charlene, is that you?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, I can. I haven't seen your slide come through, but we can show it at the end if you just want to, give your quick little introduction real quick.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Empowering Others webinar with Breaking the Glass. We have some amazing speakers lined up, so I'm very excited. As some of you might know, I'm Charlene Emery. I'm the WICT General Programming Chair. So I just wanted to thank you all for your time. Thank you for supporting us with all of our virtual webinars. And we do have some in-person events that we're planning later this year. So I'm very excited to announce that. And I will pass it on to Elizabeth.
All right, perfect. Yeah, and Charlene, if you want to, I can drop those upcoming events and dates in the chat as we go out as well. One of them is another Breaking the Glass sponsored event as well. So I highly recommend that you attend that one. Yeah, it will be on equality in the workplace. But yeah, before we get started, I'd love to thank our speakers all for joining us. Women in Cable Telecommunications, and Charlene for helping to bring this conversation to life. We're about to hear from amazing tech leaders on how they empower others. But yeah, before we get started, I'd love to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Lamb. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Breaking the Glass. We partner with tech companies and nonprofits like Rad Women, Women Who Code, just a lot of women-based tech candidate communities to provide free personalized programming on diversity and inclusion and women's career development topics. We have provided webinars for our partners like Dell, IBM, and Walmart as well. So, we're always looking to add more programs and partnerships to our calendar. So if you'd like to collaborate with us on anything, I'll be dropping my contact information in the chat. The panel will include a Q&A session. So, as our speakers are going along, don't wait till the last 3 minutes to submit your question. You can always drop your question in the Q&A box down at the bottom. That's the best place for our moderator, Samantha, to find your questions, because I know you're going to be hyping everyone up in the chat throughout the panel. That's pretty much it. I'll be dropping those resources. And if you need anything, I'll be online. But Samantha, would you like to get us started with the introductions?
I would love to. Thanks, Elizabeth. And Charlene for, introing us to the two great organizations that brought all of us together. I see we already have, 30 something people as participants, and it's always really exciting for me to be a part of such awesome conversations happening live, and it's really exciting to hear some of these are starting to be in person. Although I don't think all of us are in the same geographical region, I'm sure we're all excited to start seeing some people face to face in the future. But today, again, my name is Samantha, and I'm a principal recruitment consultant here with Computer Futures, as well as on the advisory board of Breaking the Glass. And it's really been kind of my favorite part of the work that I get to do here in the tech space. And I'm going to go through, kind of the questions with everyone, try to keep us as much as possible on time, so we do have enough time for the questions to come in, because they are always one of my favorite parts, just having people kind of live react to the wonderful things that come out. So enough about me. I will pass it right now. I think I'll stick with company brand. So Sunny, I will let you introduce yourself first this morning, and we'll go through.
Thank you, Samantha. Excited to join you all today. Hi, everyone. My name is Ackerman. I'm the president for SThree. We are a global staffing company. We provide specialist contract and permanent recruitment services in the STEM sector, operating in 16 countries with about 2,800 employees worldwide. And in the US, I have about 500 employees, a fantastic group of 500, and we operate 6 different brands. Many of you may have been familiar with more of the brands around computer futures, real life sciences, progressive engineering, but we have a team of experts that focus on niche specialty areas in those sectors. And really our value proposition, I feel, is that we believe that we have a deep understanding of the industry sectors that allow us to provide service to our clients and our candidates across the North American marketplace. So thank you, Samantha. Turn it over I'll go to Wendy.
Thank you very much. And fair warning, I'm experiencing severe allergies today. So if I go on and off mute to sneeze, please don't make fun. I live in Austin right now, so as you might imagine. My name is Wendy Howell. I am most recently came from a role at Cisco as a chief of staff for one of our business units. Previous to that at Symantec, Veritas, other large companies in chief of staff for mergers and acquisitions and consulting partner strategy. I recently left Cisco as in end of last year and joined as the CEO of Executive Council Network, which is an invitation-only executive council network that is designed to bring value to our Fortune 500 members. So if you know Fortune 500 folks that should be in there, please join us. And we're lucky enough to have Sunny speaking at one of our events tomorrow. So thank you, Sunny.
You bet.
Do I pick or someone else pick?
I think there's only one
There's
choice
only
left
one.
on the
Jackie,
table.
you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie Donaldson. I run global product strategy at Disney Streaming Services. I think you probably all heard of Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN Plus. So I began at Disney Streaming 4 years ago. And I've pivoted quite a few times within the organization. So I just started this role in global product strategy last September. So it's been a fantastic ride to 100 million subscribers, and we're enjoying it. Very fast paced, which is what I like, but really appreciate being invited here with these 2 amazing women. And as we were saying before, Samantha, you're probably going to have to shut us up because we're kind of like wallflowers, you know, we don't talk very much. So we might have to be curbed a little bit.
I'll do my best. It's hard to cut off some of the glorious information that I'm sure all 3 of you are able to share. So I'll try to pick the right moments to quiet us down on a few of our favorite topics. And on that note, I think we'll just jump right into it. I promise I'm not picking favorites, but Sunny, I am going to send our first question your way on our topic today. But really, you know, as an organizational leader, obviously you cover multiple brands right now in the US, but in a global company, it's probably pretty hard to, from the top, have culture-based things that you can instill, but I think it really often does come from the top when we're talking about these things. So what kind of things can you bring to an organization, and what do you instill in the culture to really help build trust with employees so that they feel empowered to also do this, do the work that comes towards empowerment and things along these lines, you know, on their own? How do you help people make that leap?
Yeah, I think as a leader, I think it's essential to foster really a culture where courage is welcomed. And I think as women leaders, where you want people to be courageous in the business. And so I think many rewards, both professionally and personally, come from taking calculated risk. I always believe that. And that's where I've kind of built my career around. And I want people to feel comfortable taking the leap to drive their careers where they want them to go. So as they feel comfortable doing so, it's crucial that we as an organization, and all organizations, have to promote and hire people from within and put mechanisms in place to show our commitment. But investing in training, technology, advancing kind of operations and our infrastructure are ways to kind of help us arm people with the necessary tools to set them up for success. And then I think lastly, I think culture is a bit of culturally, a growth mindset is essential. I think in any business that you're in, and you've heard from Jackie and Wendy, and all of us have pivoted careers and pivoted different areas of the business and have gone into different, types of different avenues. And I think that piece is, kind of that growth mindset and culture. I think organizations should look at that. So I fully support any individually and personally people that want to, look at other experiences and other things outside of the organization or in the organization. But I think we must collectively be committed to believing that we can always do it better, no matter the area. So that's a bit of just how I've worked throughout my career. And I think as an organization, I'd want other leaders to really ensure that they're promoting that kind of collaboration and culture.
I could just jump into that as well. Sunny, one other thing that I think is really important, you referenced it as far as courage and that growth mindset. So instilling into the culture the idea of failure is not another F word. Failure is an opportunity for learning. So fail fast and iterate. I mean, it's just constantly, the agile mindset as well.
Yeah, I had an old manager that used to work with me, and she said fail should stand for, I think it was first attempt in learning, which I love.
Exactly.
So, I think again, and I've had many failures throughout my career. I'm sure we'll continue to have things that continue, happen. And I think again, is encouraging courageous kind of actions and having other people in your environment be supportive of that, I think is really, really important as an organization.
I agree. I actually have a sticky note on the side of my window here is where all my kind of little reminders to self. And one of them is fail the first attempt in learning. I actually learned that from one of my clients. He said, I want all my candidates to come in here feeling like the best thing to do is at least try. And I think that that's, just such an important mindset. So I like both of the answers from you guys on that. And then Jackie, I'm gonna pass this next one to you. So along these lines of kind of leveling up as people do try and take the courage to take the next leap, there's a lot of learning curves that go along with moving up in the sometimes straight, sometimes not so straight corporate ladder. How in these moments do you think that we can use our strength periods to empower our team members, as compared to maybe when we aren't feeling our strongest?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, there's two major themes that I think I heard in that question. And one is, there's not necessarily a direct vertical path to the top. As Wendy and Sunny have mentioned, we've done a lot of career pivots, some of which are lateral, some of which are completely unfamiliar to us, meaning you get dropped in something, as I most recently was, and said, just go fix that. And so, there's going to be periods in your career where you're just learning and you're trying to absorb and you're trying to understand what it is that you have to do, and encourage you to take the time to do that. But then there'll be periods where you have the ability to give back. And, that's a critical time as well. And that's when I highly encourage, and I do myself, I try to dedicate 20% of my week every week to mentoring and helping other people get to where they want to go. Whether that be defining their brand or figuring out how to make a jump from one side of the organization to another. I think it's really, really important for us as leaders to pay it forward. And mentoring is one of the key ways in doing that. I also think it's really critical to understand, my personal experience, for example, is I did not get to where I am by following a job. I got to where I am by following people and investing in my brand and really going after what I knew was close to my heart and where I knew I could learn the most, not where I could make the most money or get the best title. So learned lesson for me that if you follow the right people, you will end up going where you need to be. So yeah. That's what I would say there.
Oh, I think that makes a lot of sense, and really, as these always do, it really leads me into our next question of really the idea of belonging. And I think, Wendy, you, in one of the meetings that we've had around this topic, you brought up how important belonging is within an organization for people to feel empowered as they are thinking about their own careers, maybe within an organization or externally. But what are some ways that leaders, not just managers, can help people and help foster that sense of belonging within an organization to everyone?
Yes, and I will say, just before I even go to that question, sort of tagging on to this non-linear discussion that we've been having about our career pivots, what is a fun fact that many people don't know is I actually started my career in retail at Toys R Us 1,000 years ago. I had no idea, I had zero idea about tech when I went into tech. So sort of maybe one of the messages there is, don't be afraid to go out and try anything. I don't care what your background is. If you can go and learn, the skills that you need for that particular role. And 20 something odd years later, still in the, a lot of the same space. But when it comes from a belonging perspective, obviously I'm a big believer in, a really sort of, started off talking about culture, like a really sort of very open culture. And as leaders, we need to set sort of that tone. I am the biggest believer that the most important thing that I've ever glommed onto in my career is the connections and connecting. And that whole concept is really, really pulling people in with you, pulling people into other groups, into other functions, and connecting with different people, different groups, et cetera. I mean, you have your standard classic ROs, but what I always encourage anyone at any level in my organizations, when I would bring in leadership training, for example, it was not open to just vice president, director level. It was open to every level in our team down to executive assistants. So that sort of, we're all on the same team, really fostering that as well, I think is very important. Happen to be an extrovert, I know you can't tell. So it's a little me, but if you are an introvert, I really encourage folks, if you have introverts on your team or you're an introvert yourself, to really just you push yourself to be out there, not just in your own circle, perhaps within your team, but really diversity, not just in the classical sense, but cross-functional diversity. Go in and engage with other teams, other organizations. And I would say, lastly, I'm a real geek when it comes to sort of assessment stuff, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, DISC, et cetera. I encourage anyone who's on any team of mine, again, regardless of level, to sort of dig into that a little bit, because I think the more that you know yourself, if it's a StrengthsFinder, this is what makes me, happy and joyous, or if it's something like a DISC, which is really more focused on how do you show up at work and how do you show up to other people. I just think that makes you A, more self-aware, and B, more able to sort of reach out and get into those groups and other connections as well. Connections. That's my mantra.
And just jumping on there, Wendy, doing those kind of assessments and understanding who you are helps you build the brand. So exactly. An important pivot for me, right? You won't find on my resume anywhere product. So, some people would wonder, well, how is she now, the VP of product strategy? Well, that's because I had a brand that said I could fix certain things. And they saw a part of the organization where there needed to be some changes. And so they brought me over for that reason, not because I was an expert in brand. You can learn brand, you can learn tech, you can learn all of that on the job, but making sure that you're doing something that plays to your strengths versus your weaknesses is really going to what changes your trajectory on your career.
It goes back to that courage again, Jackie, where you were like, I have no product background. Guess what? How I fell into mergers and acquisitions, someone just asked me if I wanted to do it because we just acquired a company and we had never before. And so the answer was, sure, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure out how. So big believer in take any opportunity. So yes, and if you can't, connect with people who can help you. So there you go.
Yeah, ask for help, ask questions. I think the piece around going back to the belonging piece is really interesting. And, Samantha, you asked around kind of like belonging in an organization is kind of a factor for people feeling somewhat empowered. I mean, I think it's not enough to say everyone has a place. We must make room for everyone. And that includes having diverse leader representation at every level in the business, and really sometimes forbidding kind of, exclusive behavior at every level, and ensuring that as a leadership team, we're demonstrating our support around individuality and diversity. And so leaders and if you're coming into being a new manager, a new director, coming into a role, it's that how do we improve that belonging for all? We must make room for everyone within the organization, and that's a really important piece that I think as leaders we need to make sure we continue to reinforce.
And for those on the that are listening, some people are going to feel like they don't have that within their org. We've all been there, where we've been in organizations that just kind of are missing the boat in terms of culture. And that's when I encourage people to reach out to get mentors in other parts, other companies outside of your organization. You can find that strength, not just within the position or the group or the company you're in now. There are those outlets that can help you to find that brand, help you find your next step, if it's not available to you within your organization.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. Something I learned probably from a BTG event years ago at this point was the idea of having a personal board of directors. And I think you can choose to have a diverse group of leaders in your life, even if maybe at this stage your organization might not have those. So I think that's a really, really great point, Jackie, on you do have control of some of the diversity that you hear thoughts and opinions from, in your own personal career growth and everything too. So great point. Sunny, we're gonna loop back to you on this next one. So this is off of a little bit of a different path, but in terms of organizations, I think vision is something that a lot of leaders speak about. It tends to be the guiding light of the organization, and what all, leaders, managerial or not, I like kind of clarifying we have leaders in a number of different ways in most companies, but that vision that everybody is working towards, I think a lot of people currently are finding that might be a little bit more challenging or more important in this remote workforce. So what is one of the ways that you can help kind of identify and share a vision within an organization so folks feel empowered in their work, but also connected while we all are maybe, not co-located?
Yeah, great question. I think vision is one of those things. It's imperative to create kind of a vision-centered environment when you're working. I think about the purpose of the work in which we do, and I always talk to people. I've been at the organization now, SThree, now 13 weeks, and I fell into recruitment right out of college because I found incredible meaning in the work that I was doing and helping people find employment and find jobs and find careers, and it was an incredible purpose that I found in the work immediately. So I think it's imperative for organizations to create kind of a vision-centered environment. And from that, I think there's behaviors that you should be able to demonstrate as an organization that, around that vision. But we have to constantly communicate the vision and keep it really kind of forefront of the actions and the behaviors. And everything we do needs to be kind of tied back and supporting kind of that overall vision. And I think from just a corporate, social responsibility efforts to new partnerships to the day-to-day operations, the question should always be, how does this kind of fuel our purpose and our overall vision as an organization? So I think it's a really important piece. And I think, if you have a clear line of sight of what that vision is and what that means to you, and then tying it back to your purpose and then the actions that you take as individuals in the businesses that you serve, I think it's a really important piece to empower people in their careers and to take different steps and new career paths and new steps in their overall departments. And so I think it's a really, really important piece that people feel like that vision is part of the organization and they're empowered in their work because of that. Yeah, it's a really important one.
Yeah, and I think also, Sunny, in the world with those of us who are in these very fast environments, if you can have 37,000 different priorities thrown at you, and those may change 50,000 times in that same day. So always trying to tie back, okay, there's 100 things, I can't do them all. What is most closely aligned with the vision of the organization overall? So the better you can, as you said, Sunny, have folks really understand it, have line of sight to it, and know how their daily work connects to that is probably a pretty big deal as well to try and drive.
And again, just going back to the individuals that might not be in a place that that has that solid vision, I mean, that should be something you should ask for.
Yeah.
And if for some reason they can't give it to you, that tells you a few very important things, first of all. But second of all, you know, when you're put in a position that is just go fix this, sometimes you have to create your own North Star.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to figure out who your allies are, and you have to figure out what your vision is for your team. And then you're gonna have to communicate that. But it's critical, whether on an individual basis or a company basis, to have that vision. Otherwise, as Wendy said, you're gonna be thrown in all different directions. And unfortunately, your value doesn't show through if it's not connected to that vision.
I think that's a great point, especially around, you know, I think kind of back to what we had just said around diversity of these things. Vision can come internally as well, and you can also make sure that you're really aligning your internal vision with the organizations you choose to partner with, work with, and really make sure that, you know, I think empowerment does come from the internal motivation to, you know, make the change or next step or all of those things. So it's good to really partner kind of your personal along with the organizational. So I think that's a great point. And on that note, Wendy, this one is for you. I think we've spoken a lot around courage and making connections. I think Jackie is the one who mentioned about 20% of her work week is spent around mentoring as well. So I think a lot of these things merge together in the idea that not everybody comes from the same background in terms of resources when it comes to how to make connections, how to advocate for yourself. Everybody has a very different entry level access to career resources and understanding. So when maybe on the leadership side of things, when you're looking to mentor people, what is something that people should consider when they are going into a mentorship or sponsorship type of relationship, other than just advice? How else can people add value to their connections and network?
Right. And I think for those that are on, if you are a mentee, a sponsee, or you need to mentor or sponsor someone, I think the first and foremost thing that I would say is make certain that you have established, you know, with the mentee, what do they want the relationship to look like? It's very easy to, someone will come and say, hey, would you, be my mentor? That's great. What does that look like? So just make sure you define what they're looking for from the relationship. That's one. Number two, I have a severe case of I can't say no, and that has bitten me a couple of times. Make sure that you have the true bandwidth to support that mentee-sponsor relationship appropriately. You can't do everyone at one time. And I go back to connections. I mean, if you're mentoring someone to get outside there and get connected with broader, across the organization, as I mentioned earlier, but in every mentee relationship that I have, I am providing all sorts of different external connections as well. Things like events, for example. Come to this nonprofit event with me. Come to this networking event with me. come to this female awards ceremony, or whatever that is. Events are a huge opportunity to have your mentee along with you or on their own, but to really start to build and help them start to see how to build their own network. And I mean, then there's just sort of really more tactical things. I don't care industry, business, I don't care what you're doing in your career. There is no reason for every one of us to not be a lifelong learner. There is content that is free for every possible thing you would want to do, from basket weaving to, coding. So I really encourage people to take up, and it's a growth mindset, right? Back to you, Sunny. Just be a lifelong learner, whatever those passion areas are that you have, just go and figure out where you can get that. Yeah, and back to the connections and partnerships. I just think that's super important. That's probably even more important in my view than sitting down and doing, perhaps your monthly meetings or whatever that is, because your mentee relationship is over. If it's a limited time duration, then they know how to go out and continue to broaden their circles. So those are the sort of and say yes and figure out how. Always agree with that. So
yeah, and I think it's great advice, Wendy. I think also when looking kind of mentor or sponsor, what things should they do besides giving advice? I think in short, you give them the real deal. You tell people how it works in real life. I mean, I think everyone probably in some form or fashion has been either, mentee or mentor, sponsor or sponsee. And I think explaining the difference between a sponsor and mentor is a pretty pivotal one. And I think some people might know, but I always think of mentors kind of advise and coach, and sponsors act. They'll take, to and advocate for you within organizations or within functions or businesses. And the importance of what people say behind closed doors and how you should be intentional in creating your own personal brand are really, really important. I also think confidence reigns. I mean, I think while the number one skill, while skill is number one, kind of when you think about, I would argue that self-belief is a really good runner-up. And for various reasons, many of us have self-doubts, but when you have a fundamental belief in yourself, often, that confidence outweighs that negative inner voice. And so I think that piece around it, but when you're looking at, talking to someone about what else do I do besides a, mentor, sponsor, besides giving advice, it's helping people sometimes with that piece of it. And I early on in my career, and I think still, being vulnerable as a leader and sharing my own challenges and how I've overcome them and continue to, I think those obstacles are necessary for success. So despite preparation, you must go through those obstacles and you eventually become the best part of your story. But I think in those relationships, being very vulnerable with each other is really important. And so throughout my career, I've had the luxury of being a sponsor and a mentor, and I've learned more from the mentees and the sponsors that I've been a part of than probably they've learned from me. So I think it's that piece of it that's really important. But you feel really clear about what they're trying to achieve, and you tell them how it works. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the differentiation between the two, and I'm going a little bit off book here, but do any of you have advice on how to identify someone within your organization? If you are the person who would want to be a mentee or a sponsee, how to identify who might add the most value to you? And how to kind of identify where you might gain the most from maybe a very different personality type or someone in a very different role or, more senior. What's a good way to kind of go about finding someone who can be on the flip side of that relationship?
I would say, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things that I always encourage people is it's really easy and it's simple to go, I want to go like mentee with because we're really similar. She's in it, I want to be in. I far more encourage people to go and find someone who's different, who's in a different function, maybe has a different personality style, even a different leadership style than maybe you like or are used to. Because again, the whole idea of, you can be really deep and vertical in something, but it's one of the reasons I loved M&A. I love horizontal, right? Getting more exposure to a lot of different, whether that be very tactical business things or whether that be your network, right? you don't want all 40-year-old white women in your network. You want some men, you want some diversity, you want so diversity is a big deal for me in that one, and knowing what you want as the mentee. Back to where we started, I think, Sunny.
Yeah, I think, the diversity of thoughts are an important one. I mean, I think, I think to Wendy's point, you have tendencies to be able to want to be partnered with somebody, or you kind of see somebody in the business and like, wow, I really like them. I like their style, and they might be very similar to you. But I would encourage you to, as you're working through certain areas, and there's certain areas of development, we all know what those are. And if you don't, I think ask people around you and say, what are some of the strengths and areas that you think I need to kind of further develop in? And then look, to Wendy's point, look in the organization, laterally, horizontally, for people in the business that maybe have those skills and competencies or experiences that you wouldn't be maybe inclined to kind of reach out to, but it's an area that is a bit different for you and that you probably need a little bit more of that. So I actually had, early on in my career, I was partnered up with, I was just a new manager. They partnered me with the actually controller in the organization. Anybody knows I'm a salesperson at heart, and the financials of the business, thank goodness that we have really good CFOs and controllers that do really good work, but the analytical skills and the ways to look at kind of a, financial statement and look and get, like how to make decisions around investments. And, I knew as I was elevating up into the organization, I need to understand how to really read a profit and loss statement. And these are important to know, where the money's made is where investments get made. And I knew very early on as a leader, I need to kind of figure that out, right? Because that's important. So I worked for about a year with our controller, and it was one of the best relationships that I had, because it brought a whole level of skills and competencies. And he was a male, and he was introverted and a controller. So if you think the three opposite things from Sonny Ackerman, those would be, yes, that would be.
Exactly.
So it was a fascinating relationship, but I learned probably the most during that year of working with him. So.
And I think, you said it very clearly, Sunny, but for those who haven't experienced the mentor-mentee relationship, it is a relationship. So it requires effort from both sides. And it's critical that mentors really put the time in that they need to, but it's critical that the mentees go in knowing at least what they initially want. And it could grow from there, as relationships do. But quite often, I've had the experience of a mentee coming in and saying, well, help me find a job. That's not really the point of a mentorship-mentee relationship. It's not to help find a job. It's to help you as a person get to a place where you can find that job yourself. So, make sure you have the right mindset going into that relationship, and treating it as a relationship is critical.
I think that's another great piece of advice. And like we've said with everything else today, agility within that, not being afraid to ask for what you want in these relationships is a huge part of kind of entering them. And Sunny, I think I'm with you. I probably need to partner with one of our controllers over here.
Anthony and James.
Names down. I'm like, that seems like a really good call. But I moving into our kind of last official, a webinar question before we have our guest asked Q&A side of things is going to be for you, Jackie. And I think that we kind of actually brought this up a little bit on the mentor side of things, of learning from someone opposite of you, asking people where you might have growth areas. So I think on that note, seeking out that critical feedback is very important to identify where your growth areas are, maybe versus your strength areas. And then before, I think all of us have an idea of where our strengths might be, but it's good to have the flip side of that too. So how, I think that part of this question is really around building a healthy organization as well as individual. From this, Jackie, I think, how do you start identifying where to make organizational improvements from this critical feedback that maybe starts at an interpersonal level?
Yeah. So whenever I go into a new organization, which seems to happen every about year and a half for me, what I do is I spend the first couple of months doing what I call wading, like wading into a pool. And I'm just trying to get used to the water and I don't want the shock or the heart attack by jumping in. And I also know that I don't know how deep the pool is, and I don't know how many waves there are. So I really don't want to put myself in a position where I come in like a bull in a china shop without having all the information. So I do this process of waiting. And one of the critical elements to that is obviously asking within the organization that you inherited, okay, what's working, what's not. But it is equally, if not more important, to go outside your organization and find out what they think is working about your organization, what's not. Often you will find that what an organization thinks they're doing well and what they're not doing well does not match with what the rest of the organization thinks. And it's that exact mismatch that probably is impeding the success of that organization. And quite often you have to make some pretty difficult decisions and moves and changes. In my most recent move, when the CEO asked me to go do this, he said, here's where I think the problem is. Well, after my waiting experience, I had to go back and say, you thought the problem was here, but the problem is actually over here. And, that was an eye-opening experience, not just for the organization, but for leadership at the top. They're often insulated, particularly from some of the cultural silos that are happening within organizations. So soliciting that feedback and hearing the good and the bad is critical for creating the vision and mission and strategy for that team. So if you're ever in a position where you go into something new, don't just look at your immediate circle of influence. You got to go broader, and that'll tell you really how healthy that existing organization is or isn't, and where you need to focus your efforts.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think in our business, I think I shared this with Wendy and Jacqueline. We were talking earlier this week. I think, I always say that when you're new into a business or a group or department, is that you talk to the people that are in the front lines of the business, that are in the business, they're the truth tellers in the business in terms of what's happening. So go into the business at every level and talk to as many people as you can, not be just the executive team. And I think it's important to listen to what people tell you, but what they don't say also helps you identify sometimes those weak spots. And so sometimes it's like what they don't say, and you kind of will maybe ask questions like, why do we have high turnover? What has performance, productivity, and engagement slept? What's happening here? And so sometimes asking those questions that are not being brought up versus what people are telling you, I think is really important. So observing that behavior can prove to be as telling as the feedback sometimes. And so, yeah, it's a really important piece.
Well, and you've also immediately put yourself into a position of being, especially at the leadership level, Sunny, transparent and open, which is only going to serve to make, that particular person that you're dealing with, oh, okay, this is a new leader, and and it's a very transparent discussion. And I think that's huge from culture perspective, right?
Yeah, especially right now while we're all remote and yeah.
I think that actually leads us beautifully into our first question from our audience. We have a Jessica Adams who sent in, how often do you revisit your purpose and values to ensure they reflect your organization and where you're going? And I think that this lines up really well with this kind of continual critical feedback. So how often do we think that it makes sense to kind of start evaluating those? And I think, Wendy, you raised your hand to at least start answering this one live.
I didn't know that I had done the live button. I was going to type it in, but that's good anyway, because I'd love to hear everyone's in. So for me, this is not going to sound like the weak answer that it sounds like. No, it is going to sound like the weak answer.
I think she froze.
It depends on your organization. Is your organization one that,
we had lost you for just
You're back.
Sorry.
You're back.
Yeah, internet, black cloud over my head. If your organization reorgs times a quarter, and every reorg there's a new strategy or vision, and you are going to have to sort of align with that and think about how often, how often does your organization, like what's the rhythm of the organization? And there's some organizations that, they sit down on the annual basis and revisit their vision. So, but that's sort of the corporate answer. But then I think even if you're in a situation where there's a lot of reorgs, there's a lot of vision switches, et cetera, I would still keep doing an internal assessment of where I'm at right now with all the changes. Is this still sort of the same position that I want to be in? And if that's true, then is my current vision aligned? It's sort of like, there can be a lot of soup du jour depending on the size of the organization. Not that anyone's ever heard vision change more than, once a year.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think just around, because the mission is so we say why you exist. The vision is where you're headed. It is your North Star. And I think as organizations, you have to revisit that. And again, going back to that purpose and work, I think, organizations now, specifically in the past 2 to 3 years, whether you're a profit or not for profit, I mean, I think, again, the purpose and the work and time back. And I think many people that are entering the workforce today or in the workforce are looking to organizations and leaders and individuals that are leading with that vision and purpose. And that's an important piece that I think that we have to continue to revisit to make sure it's aligned to the company strategies and behaviors and objectives, right? And if it's not, you should revisit it. But yeah, it's a lot of money and energy spent into putting together mission and vision statements and purpose statements. But exactly. I mean, I think they are important, but only if they're actually kind of lived behaviors and experiences, and we continue to come back to why do we exist? Where are we headed? And it's again that North Star that we have to be back to. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think for me personally within my team, so there's the larger company vision and mission, right? But I'm at a company right now where we're moving fast. Really fast, probably faster than we should. And so for me, I reevaluate my vision and mission when I can feel the team just kind of slightly veering off the highway, or if I feel like the team is moving in different directions, then I will pull us back together and we will reevaluate. It's kind of like, making your bed every morning, right? And it's just a habit you've got to get into to make sure that you're flexible, because missions and visions should change. They shouldn't change Absolutely. As quickly as some orgs change them. If they're just trying to fix a problem that really lives in the culture of the organization, then changing that mission and vision every 3 months is not going to change anything. But when you're in high growth, sometimes it does need to change more regularly. And that's my gauge, is if I feel like something's not landing right, the team's not all cohesive, moving in the same direction, rowing in the same boat, then I'll pull that back out and we'll relook.
I think that's great. And, the continual changing can be a bit tricky on people, but I think back to what you said earlier, make sure your own internal vision, what you're working towards too, and that you are also continuously making sure that aligns with the other visions that you're working towards, if it's your internal org or the company as a whole. So I think that all of those answers really make a lot of sense on this. A lot of our questions do bring us back to the mentor-mentee side of things. I think a lot of people clearly feel very empowered within those relationships. And so this one might be a little bit tricky, but I actually think it's a very interesting point. Brittany brought this up, that mentor-mentee term implies a directional flow of value. And I know we already have stated that we don't feel that it's a relationship, it's a two-way street. Do any of you have language or terminology that you might prefer to use or have heard used in other cases that make it more apparent that the flow is more bidirectional? It's not a one-way flow of information or value.
That's a great question. I like the idea of the bidirectional, because that's really how I see it. It's this relationship is kind of complex and composed of respect and trust, and both parties kind of share my perspective, kind of the responsibility for the success of that relationship. So I think going into it knowing that, but again, also going into it knowing that it's like not mentor mentee, sponsor sponsee. It's like, you know, there's a, you know, learning from each other. Because I frankly say, I mean, I'm mentoring right now some individuals in the business, and I'm learning a lot around different areas of like recruitment and technologies and different things that we need to learn. And I'm again learning a lot from it. So it is very much kind of a bi-directional relationship, I would say. But it is that piece about building trust and, you know, knowing that you've got that ability to kind of learn from each other. I think is a really important piece. Although you might be seeking that relationship because someone has something that you want to learn from. But I think going into it knowing that you can also learn is important. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a career partnership in many ways. So quite often I go into these relationships where I'm asked to like, hey, can you help me navigate this scenario? And what's interesting about it is I don't have an answer right out of the gate. We huddle and we flush out ideas, and then I go away and I talk to some other people that I know that might have more knowledge, and you know, come back and we huddle again. So quite often it's more of a partnership than a mentor mentee. Depends on the situation, right? Sometimes I'm being asked very specifically for career advice, so that's a little bit more one way. But when it's, hey, how can we solve this for the organization, or for the betterment of women in the organization, or for the betterment of people of color within the organization, whatever the case may be, that's more career partnering in my mind.
Yeah. Can also be a business therapist at times. I had one of those in my career.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I called her my therapist because it was a bit of and she was outside of the organization, right? So I would call and say, I'm, you know, dealing with this kind of cultural dynamic or this, you know, political dynamic in the organization. How do you navigate it? It felt like sometimes a business therapy relationship, I called it. We used to laugh. Yeah.
I might add that to my LinkedIn, Sunny. I think as a recruiter, it is definitely a part of my job to be a business therapist. I wish I got the 200 an hour that regular ones get, but you know, this job has its perks as well. But I think that maybe I'm cheating and stealing some terminology from our webinar, but my first thought in reading this question, depending on the exact relationship it is an empowerment relationship. And I think that can go a little bit more bi-directional as well. And of course, I think everyone mentioned there are some relationships that someone is looking for mentor or sponsorship. But if you're looking for something more bi-directional, maybe stick with the word empowerment. We like that. You know, powerful is a fun part of that. And I think we had
back to defining. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you're great.
Back to the beginning where we said, you know, as you enter into one of these relationships, I think it's really critical that you have a discussion and you define what that relationship is. Is it business therapist? Is it just, you know, spot or point career advice? Is it, you know, what is it? And if you define that in the very first meeting, and I always ask a mentee to come to the first meeting with what do you want to get out of this relationship? That's sort of like the jumping off point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it could be sometimes just helping me with self-doubt and being more courageous. And, you know, again, had one early on in my career that would push me sometimes out of my comfort zone, because I think lots of times, and I will speak on behalf of being a female leader, we have that inner voice that is always there, that never goes away. And I think sometimes just having somebody be like, you know what you're doing? Like, why are you, you know, and just be like, yeah. And I'd walk out of those sessions being a bit motivated around that. So it's really, I think to Wendy's point, going into it, knowing what you're wanting to get out of it is important. Yeah.
And Sunny, someone actually brought a question up like that in the chat earlier, which I just chatted back, is how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And, you know, and just like you said, I mean, we all have it. I think everyone has it to a certain extent. And it's just a matter of being able to, in my view, externally, I want to share, look, it's still my confident face, but you have maybe you have a mentor in the background or a business counselor or whatever that you go and you say, man, today I was just like, woo, so imposter syndrome, just sort of in an off the record or in a very,
froze again.
We lost her.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I
Let me
think
wait. We'll talk you off the ledge almost
Yeah.
every time.
so funny. You paused for a minute, Wendy, there, but I heard everything. I caught what you said. I don't know how I did that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure Wes
I
did.
know, I'm looking and I'm like, I did. So I have a black cloud that exists like right over where I sit in my office, it seems, and it sucks the Wi-Fi out sometimes. I have 12 boosters. It's just not working. So I have to figure it out.
You know, some of the advice I like to give some of my mentees is, and, you know, in some of our women's group was, you know, you should never worry about walking into a room and what your title is walking into that room. You know, be your own CEO. You're the CEO of your life. Act it. And, you know, often, particularly in tech and in telecom, you will be the only woman in that room. Own it. It's actually a superpower, believe it or not.
Exactly.
And it can be used very effectively. But, you know, I recall back in the day when I was in college, and I was in college in Montreal, Canada, and I wanted to stay in Montreal for the summer. And back then they didn't have the kind of internships that are available now. So I went and worked in a factory, boxing up toys that came in from China. I tell you what, I was the very best boxer that you have ever seen in your life. I owned that no matter what. Like I was
Right.
the first one on the, you know, on the floor, and I was the last one to leave. And some days if the work wasn't done, I skipped lunch, and just people thought I was crazy. They're like, you're a box packer. Like, you know, how can you, but you got to take pride in it.
I'm the best
Everything
damn
you
box
do.
packer there is.
Yep. Own it.
I'm not,
Own it
don't
all the way.
underestimate hard work. Yep.
That's
Love
right.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I think that pretty much brings us right up on our timing here. I'm sure everybody, as we all do nowadays, have busy Zoom schedules the rest of the afternoon as well. But thank you guys so much for, you know, being a part of this, speaking on so many different topics, organizationally, independently. I think everybody will come out of this empowered, hopefully.
Awesome. Thanks
Yes.
very much. Thanks so much for having us.
Yes,
Thanks,
it was
everyone.
fantastic. Take
Yeah,
care.
enjoyed it. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Wait, okay, there.
Nope.
Oh, I was just gonna ask for a group photo. We didn't get that at the beginning, but
Oh, I know.
it's fine. 1 sec. I gotta get this bigger. Okay, stop share.
You had her slide there for a second.
Yeah, I did. Anyway, but yeah, everyone, thanks for joining. Charlene, did you want to say anything at the to wrap this up?
No, just thank you to everyone who joined. We appreciate it. And we'll be sending out the recording and the post-event survey later this week or early next.
Perfect.
Thanks,
All right.
Charlene. Bye, guys. Happy Wednesday. Bye.